Welcome to Real Estate Radio Live, an informative and engaging hour discussing everything you need to know about the world of real estate. Your host, Tom K. Wilson, provides you with insight and guidance from his years of experience as a successful real estate entrepreneur on how to buy, sell, finance, and invest in real estate, and much, much more. Now, here's your host for Real Estate Radio Live, Tom K. Wilson.
How nice to have you back with us. Thanks for tuning in to our Real Estate Radio Live program, your number one source for all of your real estate needs and education. We're broadcasting from the number one business radio station in the San Francisco Bay Area, KDOW-AM. I'm K. Wilson, your host for the 2 p.m. Wednesday edition of Real Estate Radio Live that comes to you daily Monday through Friday at 3 p.m., along with the 2 p.m. Wednesday one, with my co-host Joe Cachero, Mike D'Ambrosio, and Bobby Decker. If you can't make the live show, you can catch your podcasts on reradiolive.com, and you can catch my programs also on tomwilsonproperties.com or on iTunes or on YouTube. We have a great program for you today on asset protection with Garrett Sutton, whom we'll introduce in just a moment. You can go to tomwilsonproperties.com for a weekly newsletter on real estate. You can also get a report on from high tech to the heart of Texas, how to select the best metro and products to invest in. Also information about commercial syndications, and one that we have available most of the time. There's one open that's available for funding. We're always welcome your questions and suggestions for topics and guests, and we offer free consultation. So with that, I'd like to introduce Garrett Sutton, whom I've known for a number of years. He's a best-selling author and one of 6 different books. He's one of Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad advisors. He's been an attorney in practice for 30 years, helping a lot of real estate clients, and also through both his books and through his practice. We've seen Robert a number of times, and he just does a wonderful job of boiling down what can be a complicated subject into easy to understand terms. He's a very great communicator and gives really good value. Garrett, nice to have you on the program.
Thanks, Tom. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
We've seen each other a number of places, and you've assisted me, and I thought it was time to get an expert on here on the program to talk to folks about asset protection. It's one of the most common questions I get from our clients that come to Wilson Investment Properties for both houses, out-of-state investment houses, and they want to know what they should do about those. Should they get insurance? Is insurance good enough? What are the pros and cons of different entities? So thought you could help boil that down a little bit. Garrett, why? Maybe I should start off asking you to review a little bit your experience and your practice. As I recall, you were in California at one time, weren't you?
That's right, Tom. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area in Piedmont, and went to Cal, and then went across the Bay to Hastings Law School in San Francisco, and practiced in the Bay Area in Washington, D.C. And then in 1989, 2 weeks before the earthquake, I decided it was time to move. I'd always enjoyed my summers up at Lake Tahoe, and I moved to Reno in 1989 and began a practice involving asset protection and helping people protect themselves against the litigious society we live in. So I've been in Reno since 1989, became very fortunate to become associated with Robert Kiyosaki and the Rich Dad Advisor Group, and have traveled with Robert around the world talking to people about how to protect your assets. Because once you get started, once you buy that first piece of property, that's the time to start thinking about how am I going to protect this asset, and how am I going to protect my other assets I acquire into the future. So that's basically my practice.
So So, Garrett, when you left in '89, just before the earthquake, I want to know whatever that magic is that you have. Have you been able to predict other major events using that same magic?
No, that was the biggest one there. I tell when I'm giving my lectures around the country, I tell people the story that I left the Bay Area 2 weeks before the earthquake. My friend said, "How did you know?" And I say I just kept driving east until the dog stopped barking.
Yeah. That's great. I know you've been heavily involved in with real estate clients. Of course, Robert Kiyosaki has been a major component of his asset advice and so forth. But it's I always was very surprised and felt that it showed resilience of Silicon Valley and the Bay Area when we had three major events in '89. We had the earthquake, we had the DOD, had the wall come down, the DOD money dried up for all the companies here that involved in that. And then we had Japanese and other Asian stock markets crash, and all that money went away. And with all of that, those three black swans, we only dropped 25%. I say only 25% is pretty tough, but I was surprised that's all we dropped, to tell you the truth.
Well, exactly. The Bay Area, like you say, is a very resilient area. I think no matter what comes, the Bay Area will be doing well.
The only problem is since values have gone up so much, rents never keep up with those market values, and therefore cash flow is really tough. And that's, as my listeners know, that's why in recent years I started going out of state and chose Dallas. So Garrett, let's talk about asset protection. Why do we need it?
Well, Tom, we live in a very litigious society. The number of lawsuits filed every year just keeps going up and up and up. And, the system rewards people for bringing litigation. Attorneys are on a contingency fee, meaning they get 30 to 45% of what they win. And that works well in the auto accident scenario where, most people can't afford an attorney, and the attorney will take on the case and receive only payment if there's a collection. But there are also attorneys that are taking these types of cases where they're, basically shaking people down. Some of the cases involving access to properties, involving discrimination. They're attorneys that are misusing the system now, and you have to protect against that. And so it's important to understand that we live in a litigious society. It's kind of interesting. The FBI has identified a subclass of person in the United States who's a professional litigant. This is the type of person, when they walk into a supermarket and they see a puddle in the aisle, instead of prudently walking around the puddle, this type of person will deliberately fall so they can sue someone. And that element,
isn't that sad? Yeah.
It is.
It's very sad. Isn't that really sad? And you could say, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That element exists in our society, and you and I aren't going to change that anytime soon. So
that's the point I was going to make. Yeah. It's you'd like to see it different, but the reality is it is what it is, and while it's that way, we've got to you got to work with the system.
Exactly. And it's kind of interesting. They did a poll in the state of Louisiana, and they asked the average citizen of Louisiana, how are you going to get rich? And the number one response was to win the lottery. Of course, the old joke there is your chances are the same whether you buy a ticket or not. But number two is the litigation lottery. The number two way that these citizens saw that they would get rich would be the ability to sue someone. And so we have this litigation lottery mentality in our society, and we have to protect against it.
What are let's talk about so we've kind of reestablished that the problem exists, and I'm sure you like to say it's not a matter of if you get sued, it's a matter of when.
Right.
I think I've heard you say that.
Right.
And And then, what's the situation when that happens? Now, when people have asked me before, of course, I advise them I'm not an attorney, and I'll get you in touch with somebody like Garrett who can really explain it. But I do mention to people that, for that entity to kick into play, you do have to have a problem, and it has to be a problem you can't solve. And indeed, that's probably one of the first. It's a tenant or a contractor on one of your properties with a property manager. Sometimes I've heard folks saying, "Well, to heck with them, I'm just not going to deal with it," and that's when it can really brew. So the first thing to do is to try to solve the problem quickly up front before they get thinking about litigation. Would you agree?
I would agree. And, to give an example, I was giving a talk in San Francisco, and this lady came up to me and said she was buying a duplex, and she was interested in an LLC. And I said, that's a good way to protect yourself. In California, an LLC costs $800 per year to the Franchise Tax Board. And she said, oh, my gosh, I can't afford that. I go, well, that's your choice. And she decided to hold it in her individual name. Well, the next time I was in San Francisco giving a talk, she came up to me and said, I've been sued by a tenant. I'd like to set up that LLC now. Well, of course, it's too late at that point. If you
horses out of the barn. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. You can't put a seatbelt on after the car wreck. So if you wait to set up the LLC, you are exposing yourself to the risk of a lawsuit against you personally. And when they sue you personally, they have a shot at getting all of your personal assets. So we need to take steps right away to protect yourself. And like you say, insurance certainly is one level of protection, but we must recognize that insurance companies have an economic incentive to not cover every claim. If they covered every claim, they'd be out of business. So we need that second line of defense, which are LLCs and the other good entities that will help insulate you from a claim that could be brought against all of your personal assets if you hold property in your individual name.
Yep. So we got the sequence would be you have a problem, you don't solve it, so that's the first thing you should do. Then two, you get sued, and if you lose the case, you hopefully have got limited, you got liability insurance in place.
Right.
But sometimes, because of all the exclusions you mentioned, sometimes that may not cover it, and that's when your LLC is certainly comes into play. So we'll be back in a moment. We're going to talk about the different kinds of ways you can hold title, and Garrett will explain some of the pros and cons of that. So we have with us today Garrett Sutton, a Rich Dad advisor with Robert Kiyosaki, and a very experienced attorney. And we will be back in just a moment and talk to him some more about asset protection on KDOW 1220 AM.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live, streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, just visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Live, Tom K. Wilson.
We've got with us today Garrett Sutton, a very experienced asset protection attorney, best-selling author, and one of Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad advisors, whom I've known for a number of years. Has an excellent reputation. Has a lot of clients and done a lot of work with asset protection of real estate, which is why we have him on the program. Garrett, what are the different ways one can hold title, and briefly maybe go over the pros and cons of the different ones?
Well, there are four ways that are very common to hold title that provide no asset protection. So we'll talk about those, and then we'll talk about the good ways to hold title. So one way to hold title certainly is in your individual name. As we mentioned in the last segment, that provides no asset protection. If a tenant sues, they can get all of your personal assets. Another way to hold title is through your living trust. And People will set up a living trust to avoid probate. It makes perfect sense to have a living trust. You can save, tens of thousands of dollars during probate, or rather by avoiding probate. But the living trust offers no asset protection. And there are a lot of promoters out there of the living trust saying, hold real estate in your living trust and you'll have asset protection. It's important to realize that it does not provide asset protection. So if you're
I find a lot of my clients have that misperception. So
yeah, it's a common
at least I know enough to set them straight on that one.
Good. So if you're going to use a living trust, which is fine, you just have an LLC to hold the real estate, and then the LLC is owned by the living trust. So that gives you the asset protection at the LLC level and the probate avoidance at the living trust level. Another common way to hold title that doesn't provide asset protection is joint tenancy. And a lot of married couples will hold their house or other assets as joint tenants with right of survivorship. And the survivorship is good because if, the father dies, the mother gets the house automatically by operation of law. But it's important to realize that, again, does not offer asset protection. Someone suing can get at that asset. Another way is tenants in common. People will hold assets as tenants in common. If one of the co-owners of the real estate gets sued, they could have someone reach that tenants in common interest, and all of a sudden the innocent partner has a new partner in the tenants in common, and they can do a partition action and force a sale of the real estate. So tenancy in common, unless the tenant interests are held by separate LLCs, is not a very good way to go. So then we come to the good ways to hold title.
And how about, Garrett, before we get to that, and would partnership would be another way that's not good, right?
Yeah, general partnership offers no asset protection at all. So you would not hold real estate as two individual general partners. So yes, exactly right, Tom. The good ways would be the LLC or the LP, LP standing for limited partnership. The LLC, the limited liability company, is kind of a new creature. It's been around since the late 1970s. It started in Wyoming, and once the IRS said it could be a flow-through tax entity, it spread to all 50 states. So it's a new entity. We're having new cases come out defining the law as to LLCs, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But the LLC offers great asset protection along with the LP, and that protection is through the charging order, which is a lien on distributions, meaning if you get in a car wreck, Tom, and someone wants to get at that fourplex you own in Dallas, and they sue you, the LLC says, well, you can receive distributions from Tom's LLC that owns the fourplex, but you can't go in and force a sale of the fourplex to get paid. So that's a key feature of LLC and LP law, is that charging order protection.
So just for clarity here, the if it's not protected in LLC and you have an accident here and you get a charging order, that means they can go after your asset as well as distributions, correct?
Correct. If you get in the car wreck and you hold title in your individual name to that real estate, there is no impediment to the person suing you to get at that real estate.
So they get to the real estate as well as both distributions and the asset.
Yeah, they don't even need to wait for distributions. They can go in and get a court order to force a sale of the real estate.
Okay, we'll be back in just a moment here with Garrett Sutton, who's a very experienced attorney in asset protection, and especially in real estate, best-selling author and one of Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad advisors. We're talking about asset protection today, what ways work, what ways don't work, and giving you plenty of advice on how to navigate this whole process. So stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment on KDOW 1220 AM.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live, streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, just visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Live, Tom K. Wilson.
Our topic today is asset protection, and for everyone that owns real estate, it's something you should understand. So no matter what decision you make, at least you're making it with good information. We have with us Garrett Sutton, who is Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad advisor in this area and a best-selling author. So Garrett, let's wrap up the different kinds of entities. You mentioned LLC and LP. How about S Corp and C Corp? When should you and should you not use them?
Well, that's a great question, Tom. With the regard to the C Corp, you should never use a C Corp to hold real estate. And that's because the C Corp features double taxation. There's a tax at the corporate level. Then when you flow the distributions through to the shareholders, there's a tax again at the shareholder level. So with a C Corp, you're going to pay twice what you would with a flow-through entity like an LLC or an LP. So, for example, if you have a gain of $400,000 on the sale of real estate, you'll pay $90,000 more in taxes on just a $400,000 gain with a C Corp than you would with an LLC or an LP. And so the C Corp is perhaps the absolute worst way to hold title. And it does happen. Probably once a year we talk to someone whose advisor, quote-unquote advisor, recommended that they hold title in a C Corp, and we have to scramble to change things around. The S Corp is not a great way for long-term holds because when you transfer title in and out of the S Corp, say you have to refinance property, that can be a taxable event. But if you're flipping, if you're engaged in a trade or business of flipping, I do like the S Corp. You're not going to have a lot of gain there, and you're able to minimize payroll taxes because with flipping, that's considered a business activity, and you do have to pay yourself a salary there. And with the S Corp, we can minimize payroll taxes. So that would be the one exception when you would use a corporation. The corporation taxed as an S corporation is for flipping and that type of activity.
All right. And an LLC you can choose to be taxed as an S Corp, correct?
That's right, Tom. The LLC has great flexibility in terms of taxation. You can choose to be taxed as a partnership, a disregarded entity, an S Corp, a C Corp. So you have a lot of flexibility with the LLC. As well, with the LLC, you have that charging order protection that we like for the asset protection.
We've got about a minute left in this segment. Talk about why LP is kind of out of fashion compared to LLCs these days.
Well, by definition, with a limited partnership, you have to have two partners, a general partner who's responsible for everything, and then limited partners who are limited to the contribution, the money they put in. The general partner is personally liable for the activities of the limited partnership. So if you list yourself as an individual general partner, you haven't protected your assets. You're personally responsible. So we have to set up two entities, the LP and then a corporation or an LLC to be the general partner. And so with the LP, it requires us to set up two entities. With the LLC, we only need one entity. So a lot of people will use the LLC for that purpose.
Okay. And the LLC can also be set up if you so choose, so it has limited partners as well, correct?
Yeah, you can have various classes within the LLC to keep people out of management. The LP is still in favor with family situations where mom and dad, with as little as 2% ownership of that general partner through a corporation or LLC, have absolute control. So the kids can't say, "Hey, sell the duplex. We want to go on the tour with the band." You know, I mean, the parents.
Okay, we'll be right back. And I'm sorry, Garrett, we got a break for a commercial here, and we'll be right back in a moment with Garrett Sutton on asset protection. Tom K. Wilson on KDOW 1220 AM.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live, streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, just visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Live, Tom K. Wilson.
We're talking about asset protection today with veteran expert Garrett Sutton, who is the best-selling author and one of Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad advisors. So we're discussing the different kinds of entities. Garrett has told us about how he generally favors for most folks holding real estate in LLCs. And let's continue from there, Garrett. Anything else you want to tell us about the LLC?
Yeah, the LLC has an extra tax in California. So if you have gross receipts of $250,000 a year or more, and gross receipts is just money coming in the door, it's not profits, you'll pay an extra tax of $900 for that LLC. And when you get up to in the millions, $5 million or more, you pay an extra $11,000 for the use of an LLC. So that would be a situation in which some people would use a limited partnership. And even though you have to form those two entities, one is the limited partnership and one as the corporation or LLC to be the general partner, even though you have to pay $800 times two, that's still a lot better for a large apartment complex than the $5,000 or $11,000 you'd have to pay with an LLC. So there is some use for LPs in California.
And that's because the LP is not hit with the gross receipts tax, just the $800 a year filing fee.
Right.
Or not filing fee, but a holding fee.
Right.
Okay, so LP is not hit with gross receipts tax, but LLC is.
Right.
So if you're doing a large business, have a lot of money coming in, then that's a time when you consider that. And another, I guess, is S corp kind of also gives you that protection from gross receipts tax, right?
Right, but for a long-term hold, you wouldn't do the S corp because when you have to refinance, you'd have to. Most banks say, "All right, pull the title out of the S corp into the individual names. We're going to put the loan on it when it's in your individual name. Then you can transfer it back into the S corp. That's a taxable event. Maybe with a larger property, you wouldn't have that issue." Because the bank would look to the property as opposed to the individuals. But still, I think you're better off using a limited partnership over an S corp in that scenario.
Okay. Talk about how things vary from between states. A lot of our listeners are in other states than California.
Well, good. They're in a good spot. California has a very weak asset protection law. The courts have said if someone has been in a car wreck and needs to collect, one of the remedies is the charging order, but another remedy is judicial foreclosure, where the court says we're not going to impose the charging order, which is a lien on distributions. Instead, we're going to allow the car wreck victim to force a sale of the assets so they can get paid. New York and Georgia have similar laws. So we need to appreciate what laws apply in which state. You want to use a state that has a very strong charging order law, which includes Nevada and Wyoming, and then you need to structure your affairs so that you can take advantage of these laws to the best of your ability. It's somewhat more difficult now in California to do this, but we have to plan more for California than we do for the IRS. Just because California is very aggressive in collecting their $800 annual franchise tax board fee, and that leaves you subject to California laws. So, I'm on the phone all week, Tom, with people providing me with their situation, and then we just plan accordingly. There's no one-size-fits-all type of scenario. We plan according to your specific situation, but it is important to realize that in California, there's a lot of planning we have to do because the state is very aggressive in collecting those fees.
And in general, when you're setting up LLCs for clients for real estate, you tend to like Wyoming or Nevada for them?
Yes, Nevada and Wyoming protect even the single-member LLC by statute. Now, there are a couple cases that have come out that have limited that to a certain extent, but Nevada and Wyoming are very strong states when it comes to LLC laws. South Dakota, Alaska, and Delaware are also strong when it comes to protecting the single-member LLC. But I really like Wyoming for one reason, Tom. They don't put your name on the Internet. If you're the owner of a Wyoming LLC and you go to the Secretary of State's website in Wyoming, it doesn't show who the owners are, which I really like. And
I would think most people could. I think most folks could figure out the value of that without without even getting your advice. Right?
That's pretty easy to understand.
Yeah.
And then the annual fee in Wyoming is only $50, and California it's $800. Nevada it's $325, and it could go up now that the legislature's in session. But Wyoming's only $50, so I think that's a good state to look at, and most of our clients are using Wyoming for those reasons.
Okay, so just for clarity in the minute we have left in this segment, there's kind of two directions of protection you use these entities for. One is if you have a problem in the asset itself to keep it from getting to you personally, and the other is to protect that asset if you have a personal problem, right?
Correct. There are two types of attack, and I write about it in the book, Loopholes of Real Estate. Attack number one is the inside attack, where the tenant sues. They can get what's inside the LLC. Attack number two is where you get in a car wreck. It has nothing to do with the real estate, but they want to collect against the real estate, and the LLC will protect you in both cases.
So you get the value of protection in both directions with that LLC.
Right. It's important to appreciate what it can and can't do, but the LLC or the LP is the best device we have for protecting you in both situations.
Okay, we're going to be back with Garrett here in just a moment for some wrap-up and summary. It's a pleasure to have Garrett Sutton with us today, very experienced attorney in asset protection, especially with real estate, best-selling author, and one of Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad advisors. So it's very nice to have him with us, and we'll let you know how to get more information and something about his books in a moment when we come back on KDOW 1220 AM, the Wall Street Business Network.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live, streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, just visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Live, Tom K. Wilson.
Our topic today has been asset protection with Garrett Sutton, an expert in that arena with 30 years experience, best-selling author, and one of Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad advisors. Garrett, tell us a little bit about just a quick overview of the books and where you would point folks if they want to read more about the good information you've been giving us today.
Well, thank you, Tom. Yeah, there are 4 books that I would suggest for your listeners. The first one is Loopholes of Real Estate, and that deals with the tax and legal strategies for owning real estate. And it was the best business book of 2014 by Pacific Book Review, to brag a little bit. But it goes through the various strategies for taking advantage of taxation and taking advantage of the law to protect yourself. So that would be a book for your listeners to consider. I've also written
They can get these on Amazon, right?
Oh yeah, Amazon sells them cheaper than I can.
Yeah, these are all part of the Rich Dad series, right?
Correct. And then I wrote Start Your Own Corporation, which goes through the reasons for setting up a corporation and the basics for doing it. I also wrote Run Your Own Corporation, because a lot of people read the first book, Start Your Own Corporation, and said, okay, I set up the corporation, now what do I do? And so I follow 3 teams of entrepreneurs through the first 5 years of their business. We go through all the issues that you face starting out and how to run your corporation properly. And then I wrote Writing Winning Business Plans. And, that sounds like it would be applicable to business owners, but I have a chapter in there on real estate because a lot of investors in real estate will prepare a business plan for their real estate. And if you're going to be buying a big property and bringing on investors, it's important to understand that those investors want to see a plan. And so the book deals with that issue as well. And so my practice,
No, go ahead.
My practice, Tom, is setting people, helping people set up these entities, and we have two websites for direct.com, and we help people through the whole process. We hold your hand, talk to you on the phone, and get you through the whole process. For people who know that they need an LLC, we've set up a discount incorporating site called protectmellc.com. And you can just go online and fill in the blanks, and we'll set up the LLC for you online. And that's a cheaper service for people who, are more of the do-it-yourselfers and just want to get it done right away. So corporatedirect.com and protectmellc.com.
Fantastic. Garrett, nice having you on the program today. It's been great to have an expert with the level of experience that Garrett does, author of many books. He's given us recommendations, and if you have more questions or you don't recall these websites, get hold of TomWilsonProperties.com, and we'll certainly get you connected. Remember, at TomWilsonProperties.com, you can also sign up for our newsletter on real estate that comes out weekly. You can get a report on how to select the best metro and products in the country. Get more information about commercial products and commercial syndications, which are available, and we always welcome your questions. So it's great having Garrett today. Thank you for being with us, Garrett.
Tom, it's been a pleasure.
Super. And we'll be back with more another segment with Garrett, so look for that. Remember, the only thing that matters is what you do next.
You've been listening to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Tune in, log in, download our podcast. Discover more at RERadiolive.com. RERadiolive.com.